How about now? Okay, well anyways, why don't we go ahead and get started. I actually have to admit I was on my way down to 124 and I thought, boy, if I didn't remember it was there, I wonder if anyone's going to remember and if anyone will show up. And then I walk over here and see all of you. Anyways, I guess we moved it into this room because of wanting to have more capacity. And I was actually going to start off by saying, you know, I've been talking a lot how analytics and related topics are important, but sort of seeing the turnout here validates that point. Anyways, I want to thank the folks from Kaiser for coming over today and sharing with us what they're doing. Some of you know from me that you know, this is a key future direction for our field, and it'll be interesting to hear what's happening at Kaiser and what opportunities there are for students and others to participate in that. So, and actually being like good analytics folks, I don't know if there's a name like analyticians, like informaticians, but anyways, being good informatics folks, I got a schedule that had it like down to 3 minutes for this, 2 minutes for this, and of course we've messed it up because we're running a few minutes late. But anyways, I'm sure it'll be a very interesting presentation. I'm just going to introduce Brian, and then hopefully he'll introduce the rest of his team. Brian Sikora is the Director of the Data and Information Management Enhancement, or DIME. Kind of sounds a lot like D-mice. He's been at Kaiser since 2005. He's originally from Pittsburgh, and he's been in Oregon again since 2005. His bachelor's degree was obtained from the University of Pittsburgh in finance, and he has a master's in healthcare administration in Portland State. And from Portland State, and he will tell us about the work that's going on. So I don't know whether you want to hold that or...
We'll try to.
Okay.
Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So we're happy to be here with you this morning. I say thank you for having us. I know this is our first big event at OHSU with this lunchtime talk, and hopefully it's not our last. We're hoping to establish more frequent interactions up here and with some of our local universities. Today we really want to talk about career opportunities in healthcare analytics, and really what I mean by that is we'll talk about, give an overview of some of the skills we see as required to be successful in these roles as it relates to what we do every day at Kaiser Permanente. Through that, talking about some examples of projects that our analysts participate in every day, and more so we are going to try to reserve about half the time today for some Q&A with you guys, like an interactive panel discussion. So that's kind of what we have in store. Half of our group today is from the health plan side of Kaiser Permanente, and half is from the medical group side. And we'll do an introduction in a few minutes. Start off, I have a quick video just to give overview of our organization and some grounding on some of our core principles, values that is Kaiser as a whole, but we also embrace within the analytics community.
Ignore that.
Yeah. Ignore the internal only.
A wise man once said, we are... Well, I'll let you read it yourself. Done? Okay, you noticed he said we, not you or I, but we. Aristotle was a pretty smart guy. He knew that the power of we could do amazing things. I mean, look at what we did. We taught the world to thrive. That's the power of we. We've been part of an amazing transformation. We've carried on the incredible legacy of Dr. Sidney Garfield and Henry J. Kaiser, two other pretty smart guys. They believed that healthcare was about keeping people healthy, not just treating the sick. They believed that health belonged to everyone. that information had the power to transform medicine. Some called it experimental. Some called it socialism. Today, the world calls it visionary. That's because we believe health isn't an industry, it's a cause. That's the power of we. We changed the way people look at health by focusing on the balance of mind, body, and spirit. We inspired people to live a healthier life. We not only talked the talk, we walked it, ran it, biked it, and yogaed it. We lived it. We created more than an ad campaign. We created a movement. And we enlisted some wonderful friends along the way, like Dr. Preston Maring, who declared the kitchen every bit as important as the clinic.
Welcome to my kitchen.
Who brought farmers markets into low-income neighborhoods, schools, and right into our lobbies. And Dr. Bob Salas, who told us that health begins with a single step, followed by another, and another, and the next thing you know, you're walking your way to lower blood pressure, reducing the risk of diabetes, and combating depression. That's the power of we. Together, we made a difference. We helped people to stop smoking, start moving, and eat better. We reduced broken bones in seniors by 41%. We lowered hypertension by 80%. And we reduced deaths from heart disease by more than 30% compared to the rest of the nation. We saved lives. Now, we are getting noticed. A 5-star ranking for Medicare quality and service. Highest in member satisfaction from J.D. Power and Associates. Number 1 in customer loyalty in the Net Promoter Benchmark study. Number 1 on the 2011 Diversity Inc. Top 50 Companies. And Fast Company named us one of the world's most innovative companies in healthcare for our leading-edge work with electronic medical records. How about that? Our Center for Total Health in the nation's capital shines as a testament to our founders' vision. And we're lending our voice to pressing health issues.
The weight of the nation is out of control, but we can fix that.
That's the power of we. In 1960, Dr. Garfield envisioned computers as a way to transform care delivery. Today, we have the largest electronic medical record system in the world. My Health Manager connects our members with their caregivers millions of times a day. We are pioneers in telemedicine and Da Vinci robotic surgery, giving even remote areas access to expert care. We launched the KP mobile app, giving people one more way to take control of their health and their family's health. We're leading the way in social media. We're sharing our stories, and our members are sharing theirs. Together, we are changing the future of healthcare, and together, we will continue to teach the world to thrive.
Things are looking up.
May we all live well, be well, and I'm just going to go ahead and say it, thrive.
So I like the we as a key word when it comes to analytics, and especially analytics inside Kaiser Permanente. As I mentioned, half of us are from the health plan, half of us are from the medical group, but despite those divisions, we are primary care, we are specialty care, we are hospitals, we are contract hospitals with OHSU, we are insurance and call centers and denture labs and mail order pharmacies. In order to bring all of that data together, to turn that data into useful information to help our regional leaders, help our clinicians with the answers they need to help solve the problems they have to solve to improve healthcare in our region, we have to work together. And we have to collaborate, and we have to bridge that gap between all of the data that's being created by our systems and our clinicians and our leaders. So with me today is some of the key folks from Kaiser Northwest that participate in our analytics program. Yvonne Zhao, who is a director from the medical group. We have Allison Schmidt, who's a manager within the health plan. Keith Crowland, who's a manager within the health plan. Desiree, who's one of our recruiters from the medical group. Debbie, a recruiter from our health plan. Xinfang, who's hiding behind the wall, is a lead analyst with our medical group. And Delilah, who's a lead analyst within the health plan organization. You'll have a chance to interact and have questions, answers from all of these folks today, and more importantly, afterwards, we're all going to be available for networking and one-on-one conversations as well. I encourage you to take advantage of the panel discussions today. If you have ideas that spark, definitely ask them. We want to hear your questions, and we have some, just help get started, we'll have some canned ones to get things moving. My advice is you go through this day and listen to the conversations. When it comes to skills that are needed to connect people to data and information, the true core of analytics, there's really three table stakes in my opinion. One is programming skills. You have to be able to extract, integrate, and analyze data. And that means starting with a blank screen and being able to use SQL or SAS or a program like that to extract data from a data warehouse or a system and integrate it together to produce a report or analysis. You must have critical thinking skills and a methodical approach to solving complex problems. And finally, that bridging skill, key communication skills that clearly deliver nuanced information and insight to diverse audiences, because not everyone is trained in understanding even standard deviations, mean mode, let alone more complex reports or information. So you have to be able to deliver that information in a way that will be received by your audience. So I say, as you listen and you think about what you're hearing today, is like think of them from a skill set perspective in those three slices. With that general introduction, Yvonne is going to talk about some of the solving of how we apply analytics to solve problems in healthcare. I think then after that we'll get more into the skills on the individual level.
Good afternoon, everybody. Can everybody hear me? Okay. It's really good to see that many people in the audience. It just reminded me about 15 years ago when I got my PhD in biostatistics at USC. There were not much opportunities. Either you go to pharmaceutical industry to be a biostatistician, or you stay in academic to do cancer or epidemic research. But right now is a really exciting moment, an exciting time. So I'm going to talk a little bit about
Down there.
So again, analyticals is actually pretty new terminology. If anybody in the field like 10 years ago, all you heard data management, analysis, or statistical analysis. But the definition of analyticals keeps changing and expanding. So here's a pretty new terminology. So it's about systematic use of the data and also discover business insights. It uses lots of new applied analytical disciplines. So we'll talk about statistics, we talk about contextual, we talk about the quantitative, predictive, as well as some of the new emerging methods like artificial intelligence, machine learning. So there are so many new things that are coming, and if some of you like to be creative and innovative, the field is really wide open. It is also trying to, with all those insights, really trying to influence the operation, the business. It's drive fact-based decision for planning, management, measurement, and learning. Traditionally, we usually do retrospective analysis or maybe even clinical trial. There's some, prospective work. But nowadays, really descriptive, predictive, really want to understand what will happen, as well as prescriptive. Basically, it's not just to predict what will happen and how it happened at that time point to give you some options and probability, and so you can make a decision based on what the information provided to the managers. So healthcare is really going tremendous change, and those are fundamental transformative change. So it used to be, okay, how many procedures have you done? How many X-ray have been done? And those are the claim systems that we get reimbursed. But now we are gradually moving to a value-based system and a business. So it's really to drive better outcomes, more productive and efficiency of the care delivery. And in addition, as you are probably all aware, we have a wonderful company called Epic that we are all using their products, and which creates tremendous information data in the healthcare industry. And those kind of paradox, it's a plus, so we get lots of information that we can use, because traditionally collecting data is most expensive venture. Now we have so much data, but it's also, in a way, people say we have too much data and we don't have much insight, because data sometimes could be dirty and you have to clean it up, you have to understand the workflow and make it meaningful and useful. For healthcare organizations, they are increasingly looking at analyticals as a kind of a market differentiator, to use it to consume, unlock, and apply new insights for information. So drive clinical and operation improvements to meet business challenges, as well as some of the transition information to produce a report to help us to make decisions. So IBM has done a survey to 100 healthcare executives and asked them whether they use analyticals in those 3 categories. So you can see that the leading companies use analyticals as to inform decision making and strategy, and sales marketing is far much more compared to other average performer organizations. So analyticals is really important for us to meet the challenges and to move forward and leading the market. So in general, analyticals can be used in those 3 categories to solve the business problems. So one is improve clinical effectiveness and member satisfaction, how we treat patients, how we interact with patients, how we understand our patients. And also the number 2 is improve operational efficiency. Can we reduce the waste? Can we make things happen quickly? And then the last one is the financial and administrative performance. So there's lots of areas, and in a way, any areas can be used for analyticals. So I'm going to just give 3 examples and show you how we in the Kaiser Permanente use analyticals to help solve business problems. So the first one we call the OpQ. It's an operational support tool to improve operation efficiency and speed. It is a tool that providing near real-time data. The information is coming from Epic back-end database, and data being refreshed every 15 minutes. And we use this to help frontline clinician leaders and managers to really operate clinics and help them to understand what's going on out there, and so they can really take action in the moment before the opportunity goes away. And as you also see, I think analyticals emphasize the visualization, data visualization. So many of the display was pretty colors that help our users to see things, important areas much quicker and clearly. So in terms of analytical skills, I think Brian has talked about 3 categories. Certainly, critical thinking and as well as communication is both are very important. But if anyone comes to me, and the first thing I want to learn about that person is really understand that person, whether he has a general interest in quantitative, or what has he invested in the analyticals. Because as you can see, whatever the current work is very complex, and whoever comes to us, they usually don't have all the experience because it's really a brand new area. So it's really trying to understand, and really train somebody takes lots of energy and effort, but it also requires determination from the person. So those kind of things I think we look at first, because it takes effort to a partnership to make that happen. But in terms of analytical skills, EPIC data, if you have knowledge about EPIC data, you have knowledge about EPIC, it's tremendous plus, because I know people at the OHSU, you probably get a chance to expose to some of those kind of information. With lots of data mining and really cleaning up the data so you have a really good sense which data might be generate a hypothesis, how do we validate this is correct data, this is wrong data, and takes lots of effort and analytical critical thinking, as Brian pointed out. Metrics development, we think it's really high-end analytical work. It's usually our operation leaders come to us saying, I want this metric, I want average wait time at office. So, but they don't know what back-end data is, and so you have to really understand the workflow and bring this information together and then display in a way that useful for them. This is specific work because it uses real-time data engine, and it's very challenging. So if you just talk about data quality, real-time data, and this was very granular level, so each MA has a performance score. So it raises the quality data bar into very high level, and makes things so complicated. And the Xinfen Lu, who sits there, is really the mastermind behind of it, because the data analytical engine is very, very challenging. And then, as you can see, we need to do the BI to display the data as well as SAS. Next one is really we call the patient support tool. And this is a web-based tool and designed to enable clinicians to manage their panel patients, the chronic care needs and preventive needs. And as you can see, this is one doctor's panel. And it can be sorted in any way according to any of those columns. The color schemas really tell doctor exactly what are the protocols behind of it. So they don't even need to click on it. So it's efficient for physicians to use. And so it's at a glance that either for outreach, so have their MAs to call patients. Those are the patients with diabetes conditions that they need to take care of certain preventive care or treatment protocols. Or when a patient comes in, and then you click on that patient with all the detailed care gap scores. So doctor can just quickly review all those things. And it's not just primary care doctor, it could be a specialty care doctor, and we actually now start with dental care, because patient comes to see dentist every year or optometrist every year, and those are the really great opportunities to review care gaps and make sure all the things being met. I did that wrong. Push the wrong button.
You're getting a preview of what's to come.
Yeah. Yeah. So how to manage the end of life, and we all know that healthcare cost the last year of people's life is about summary of all previous life years together. So complex care is actually a really good area to really improve operation efficiencies and also effectiveness. And our patients are telling us, many of them, they don't want to die in the hospital. They want to die at home with their loved ones. And but this is a way that we know each patient is kind of a little bit different. It depends on what age group. If you are this is algorithm developed for age over 65. So if patients or members are really healthy and robust, they don't really need to see their doctors often, but if someone have chronic conditions, then we really want to make sure that they follow all the treatment plans. And then some of the complex care patients, and they really require more case management and social support. And so we use big data. We use part of Epic data, part of some of the data marts we created for CMS as well as other purpose, and put together and use a compute algorithm that classify patients into those 4 categories. And because of different categories, the care needs are different, and their social needs are different, and how we provide the care will be different. And so the algorithm has been validated by clinicians, and it's about like it's pretty high concordance, and we're actually about to publish a paper about this work. So, so with data, you can do lots of things, and those are just 3 examples to showing how to use data analyticals to help solve business problems. This is recently, this year, led by Brian Sikora, that Northwest just went through analytical strategy reset, and trying to see what we want to do for the next 5 years. And here's a very clear vision in the middle of it. The vision we want to do is we really want to be lead the market in using personalized, integrated information to bring total health value to our members and excellent analytical insights for care delivery. It really shows a health plan and a medical group kind of come together and trying to see what we can do to help lead the healthcare industry. And on the top, the arc really identify 5 the key areas that we think we need to put more focus and be more structured and more systematically and in those areas. And I am fortunately being asked to lead the middle one, that Innovation and Advanced Analyticals Office. So, so we are all really excited about all those 5 areas, and think that will really help us to be doing more advanced analyticals that will really help us make the care operation more efficient and productive. There are also some of the fundamental areas that are really important. Have to be data governance, which is extremely important to make sure the definition is the same across single source of truth, across all the reports. How do we managing our resources to be productive, as well as how to keep our talents. And the core maintenance basically really the lots of work that we have to do to keep our lights lit, keep our care operations going, and the coordination we kind of work together about to make more systematic, collective, use like a way as we want to work together to make an improvement.
So, over the past several years, Alice and I have probably screened thousands of resumes and conducted, well, hundreds of interviews for sure. So, for the next few minutes, Alice is going to talk from that experience and her role as managing a large piece of our development team. Allison's going to talk about the analyst roles we have at Kaiser and some of the core required skills for being successful inside those roles.
Thanks, Brian. How far behind are we running?
I'm okay.
Okay, so I'll try to get us a little bit ahead here. We also, some of the information I'm going to go through, everybody pick up one of these at the front? Okay, because if we don't get through all of it, this kind of gives you a summary, so you can look at that after the session as well.
You have your full time.
Okay, so this, I'm not a podium person, so I'll probably walk around. I'm also too short, you probably wouldn't see me if I was back there talking. So this picture really just is a representation kind of how the roles all work together. There's really blend of all of our roles into each other. So it's not like we throw things over the wall when we work on a project. It's really, many of our projects require all of these roles to be successful. I think the other thing I would probably say is that this isn't representing all the IT roles we have at Kaiser as well. I mean, we have over 110,000 employees nationwide. We have an IT center that's here that gets into a lot of the really technical roles. Many of these roles are technical, but they also require the business focus. I'll talk a little bit about some of the skill gaps that we see for making the ideal candidate. So, starting over here, the business systems analyst. This is kind of a traditional role that's existed in every industry, every application. The user interaction with the source system, changing the workflow, information on demand. Somebody in the room, his wife was an application coordinator at Kaiser for Epic. This is where they actually manage the application modules within Epic to take that workflow and information in. So this is all about information into the system. If you have any exposure to data, information in gets you to better quality on the other side, right? So part of what we have to do is make sure we understand where we have to have solid workflows, where the information is consistent, and where we need real-time information in the system to help the operations make decisions as they go through the day. This portion here, the data warehouse, data store, if you're familiar with Epic, Clarity is a data store for us. We have over 150 source systems at Kaiser at any one point. We have different systems for our claims, sales, recruiting, that hold data. We get that data out of data warehouses. Sometimes that's real time, in many cases it's day lag, month lag, depending on how often those data stores are updated. Most of that work's done by IT, data movement. Those kind of functions are mainly IT functions for us. Then we get into the data analyst role and the report analyst role. The team that I manage primarily makes up of these roles, and there are also these roles on the Permanente side. Data analysts tend to focus on data marts, synthesizing information from disparate sources. So an example I would give is we get a question from our business that's how many referrals are over 45 days old that result in an emergency department visit at our hospital and other hospitals. Right? That seems like a very fair question because we want to reduce referral backlog, get people into the specialist quicker. Well, that requires going to claims, so we can see our outside hospitals, our own electronic medical record for emergency departments, our referrals management system, and maybe even billing to understand those kind of questions. So we have to take at least 4 different sources, bring that to answer those kind of questions. That's the kind of work we do in the data analyst space. Report analyst space tends to be more information presentation out, dashboards, scorecards, reports. We use a variety of tools. One of our main BI tools that we use is Cognos, and we'll talk a little bit more about the skill set as we get there. So if we're presenting information, that tends to be more on the report side. Inputting information tends to be on the business systems analyst side. The data analysts sort of pull information from many different perspectives to put them together. Overarching on the top is the information analyst role. I kind of call this the umbrella role. This is probably our most advanced role for statistics, forecasting, modeling. We have several people in this room that we've brought with us that play this role. They also are the key to help synthesize what question are we actually trying to ask, and what information do we need to answer that question. So definitely need the technical skills, but this is probably the core role that really helps us to get to that root of that business problem that we're trying to solve and how we're going to solve that with information. So that's kind of the general overview. Can you go to the next slide? Thank you. This is the same information that you have on your grid. So just to orient you, it's the same roles across the top that we just reviewed. I won't read this in detail, but I do want to hit a couple of highlights. We've talked a little bit about the main function already. The core products, for the business systems analyst, that's process, system configuration. For the data analyst, that's marts, tables, BI metadata framework. Report analyst is more about historical trends, information dissemination, scorecards. Information analyst, lots of different touch points here, analysis, requirements, queries, forecasting, data mining. There's quite a wide variety of space that the information analysts get in. It's also our largest role set at Kaiser. There's a little bit about the service they provide, and then the core skills. So to be an effective business systems analyst, you definitely need to have process engineering skills. So you need to be able to take what's the current workflow, what's the intended workflow, what are the changes. You need to be able to understand how that system needs to change to reflect those. What's that human interaction with that system, and what information is really needed within that to make an effective workflow. You also need to, typically you need some kind of knowledge in the business area. So we talk a lot about healthcare, but we have 25 businesses in one. We have lab, pharmacy, imaging. we don't always get a full mix. So if we can get a partial mix of somebody, to Yvonne's point, we'll train them. The ability to adapt, learn, be creative, learn new subjects, really get in and understand context is really a core skill. When we get to the data analyst space, BD expert SQL, logical physical modeling for database design, Cognos, SAS, Informatica, BI tools. Many of the people from this role come from IT backgrounds. The core skill set that I tend to not find when I'm recruiting is someone that can put the context of the business problem and really make that translation between the business and the IT and actually do the work as well. So that tends to be the core skill set that lacks. So you either get someone that's got all the technical and they can't describe anything about their project, or have someone that can describe the project and is like, I have no idea, I just hand it off to some developer somewhere. So those are usually the two ends of the spectrum on the candidates that when they come in we think, okay, this is the candidate, and it's usually they're on one end of the spectrum or another. So if you can blend those two things, you'll hit the mark on the data analyst. Report analyst, we're really looking for, like medium level SQL, some kind of BI reporting tool. There's variety. We don't really necessarily pigeonhole anybody, but our tools change. We train on this. We expect people to be able to adapt. The emergence of data visualization is really coming up in this space. Someone that can actually take and synthesize information visually for people is really growing in this area. Information analyst, again, medium SQL, SAS, statistics, industrial engineering, MBA backgrounds, some cases PhDs if we're lucky. So these are the kind of skill sets that we're looking for there. So I put a little bit of examples of work at the bottom just generally, but I think if we go to the next slide. So the inks Yvonne went into quite a bit of detail, so I'm not going to repeat she probably went into a lot more detailed examples. These are some of the example products that people in this room have recently worked on. Working with clinical services department to gather business requirements, IT teams, design solution, operational reports for department workflows. So actually taking that clinical department, figuring out what they need to do to improve and making the workflow changes. Let me see, partnered with leadership team of transitions and care program to develop reports. They identified the highest risk patients currently or recently discharged from the hospital. These are reports that are used by care teams interacting with patients during and after their discharge to try to make sure we have the right care plan for them and try to keep them from coming back into the hospital. This is the project Delilah's working on, so when we get the panel, she could probably speak to this even more. If we go to the next page, thank you. So the next one, the data integration, foundational data marts, integrated claims, hospital, inpatient data. I spoke a little bit about that question earlier on. This is the kind of work that a data analyst lead on my team has done. Built the Cognos Business Intelligence Report that provided operations with the ability to track ill time throughout the region. So again, every company has attendance issues, right? For us, it's really challenging. We have to staff the hospital at a certain level. We've got to make sure we have the right people in the clinics. We don't want sick people treating our patients that could make them more sick. So making sure that we have the right ill time monitoring, or we have ill time patterns through the year for staffing issues. Those are kind of business questions we also get into as part of our organization. Appointment utilization for specialty care departments. We implement improvements to appointing and scheduling. We're always trying to get appointment cycles down lower so we get our patients through the doors more often. And the last one was some of the more of the work related to OpTube. So Yvonne went into detail about that as well. So I think that was all of the.
Yep.
So that's my time. Any one or two questions about that? We'll have some time at the end as well. We'll have a panel. And we have a pretty good mix of role skill sets here, so you have specific questions. But this kind of gives you the summary. Again, there'll be some variation by role, by job position that comes open because projects are very specific. But it's not always like we've got to have the checklist of the client, right, or the person applying. We want to make sure we have adaptability as well because the tools we used 5 years ago are completely different. The project we were working on 6 months ago is completely different. We have emerging needs. We're constantly changing, so that ability to adapt is probably the #1 thing. And synthesizing the problem to the technology is what we're really looking for. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so now Keith, Allison, Delilah, and Xinfeng are going to come up for more of a panel discussion. So we're curious to see some of the questions you may have and try to stump the analysts a little bit. And we'll use the balance of the time for Q&A and interactive discussion. So if you have a question, maybe just stand up and ask, and we will do our best to answer.
That's a question. Kind of getting at the tools. One of the challenges, well, you mentioned about how the tools change. Another challenge that academic programs have is that they don't always have the resources to afford the tools that organizations use. What do you recommend to students who want to get skills, maybe not exactly with those tools, but similar kinds of skills that they would be easily able to adapt to the kinds of tools you use?
So I think if you look, SQL shows up on everything in one. So almost every tool we have is really a SQL writer. It does that. But if you have a core and understanding how you put programming language together, and then you can have the skill to adapt and learn a tool rapidly of how you're going to make that logic more efficient with the tool, that's what I would say to master, because that's probably the core skill set that threads through all of them and is a core to understand any tool that we might learn.
And there's, I was gonna say, there's open source programs out there too that are good for learning, like R, OpenBI, and using like census data or American Community Survey. Like you can do a lot, like you can build skills on your own of working with complex, messier data sets as opposed to just nice, neat textbook package data sets. Like using some of those free open source programs, because the thought process is once you master the thought process, learning a new application is much easier.
On the information analyst side, SAS is our primary tool, and so programming in SAS, but if you program in anything, it's pretty quick to pick up. I think we're looking at technical aptitude. I mean, we're looking for analysts to program, not programmers. I think there's a real difference. And so personally, when I'm looking to recruit, it's some of the really critical thinking and analytical skills and being able to solve problems, but obviously showing technical aptitude. But if you've done statistics classes and other things, you'll be able to do that. But for some of our more entry-level positions, we brought folks in and got them skilled up real quick.
And there are student SAS licenses as well.
Yeah, and I think maybe get a SAS license for the department, the students can use, that will be helpful. I do think that we deal with a large data set, so it's not a simple data step. If there's a complexity of the data that either in the course or whatever, exercise that way, so people can just start to feel, have a taste of it.
More and more institutions seem to be abandoning SAS for R. If you really, and R seems to be pretty widespread, if someone was very technically trained in R, that would be okay with you in terms of skill set?
Yeah, I mean, I don't see, especially at Kaiser, and I think in healthcare in general, I don't see SAS ever really going away completely because it is so deeply ingrained within our organizations. But if you're competent in R and you're competent mastering the techniques and the program, that taking the leap from learning your first program to your second, it's much smaller going from your first to your second to third. So I think it's like good solid experience with a tool is important, and I think R would be a fine one.
I mean, normally in a first year, I mean, the complexity and breadth of the data sources we have, so you may have a specific consulting kind of project that you're working on with a client within the organization, that you need to draw information from a whole bunch of different sources. Some of those are more insurance plan, kind of member centered, and some are more specifically within healthcare delivery, whether it's Epic. And so being able to understand all of those and pull those things together is kind of like the first year, you just need to do that, and then in parallel with that, you can learn SAS if you're going to or switch over to SAS. And we've done it on many occasions, and it's definitely not a barrier.
Yes. I guess my question is more about your sort of application infrastructure. Have you guys ever thought about having software design challenges? Because I think the government also has kind of projects like that where they have these open source challenges to design a particular tool and work with some particular data. And I think that's interesting from the perspective of, giving people an opportunity to sort of showcase their skills and understand what your business needs are.
Are you saying like an opportunity to have a project? Is that what you're suggesting?
Or like, yeah, just sort of an open project, and then you accept submissions and sort of have a panel of judges.
This is actually maybe something we might start doing something like that with innovation and advanced analyticals. We may test some of the more emerging technologies and try to see how to apply to the industry. But right now, healthcare dollar is very, very tight. Yeah. So whatever we do has to have real business goals, really trying to solve business problems. So it's not just theoretically trying to understand how does this apply or not. So it has to have business objectives.
Yeah, and I would just add to that, I mean, the demand for analytical products or outputs or analysis or data, whatever, people far outstrip the supply. A lot of the time people don't really know what they want, but they know that they need the data in some way. So prioritization of trying to work through our organization, which has pretty much every part of the healthcare system, and just being able to put governance around how we take intake. So I think it's a great idea if we can do it, but having said that, there is a vast variety of types of problems that do arise, come in, and it's just kind of sifting through that, trying to align the resources is a big challenge in itself, because there is a huge demand out there, which I think is great on the back of the healthcare system, especially on the EMR side. We've gone through that process of where everything pretty much is electronic. That's great about Kaiser. We can normally find somewhere, as long as we can link the health record number, we can pull information together, and we've done some great modeling. So it's great from that point of view. But the downside is there's a huge amount that people want, and trying to sift through all of that, and really use the strategy to make sure that we're aligning what we're doing on the things that are going to benefit the organisation going forward, and that is of itself not an easy thing.
Yeah, so where do you see the people with medical background fitting in this analytics picture? How about the interpretation of the data and putting the data in context of the patient and healthcare?
That's a really good question. In my department is another department of medical informatics, and so there are many of them really work with the physicians to configure some of the EMR functionalities, but partly I think the physician background probably high paid, and so we expect them to use their skills more appropriately, so they could be more of SMEs, MIA, we call the subject matter expert, really help with if we develop some applications, reports, whatever tools more clinical related, and so they can help bridge that gap, because it's critical to make sure the clinical information is really useful and being applied accurately. So that's one area I see. But they could be also be a champion at a medical group and help to adopt some of the analyticals and trying to be early. I guess another champion is trying to be experiment and trying to see how to use some of the tools most efficiently. So I think it's like a bridge between the clinical and the analyticals. I think that would be the best way to use some of those skills.
And there are opportunities on the operational side of what the work we do out within the hospitals to really try and fine-tune the processes and patient flow. I mean, that's integral, working with the doctors and the nurses at the hospital, right down to a very detailed level. So a medical knowledge within that, together with understanding data, kind of data skills, means that you can improve that. It doesn't necessarily have to be kind of clinical research type. There's operational questions that are embedded right within clinical operations, where having that knowledge really makes you much more valuable.
A lot of the responses that I've heard to me, have a strong component of master data management. And I was just wondering about what kind of framework do you employ there at Kaiser to ensure data quality, data validity, and what opportunities exist for students to come into those, those fields?
Yeah, we employ chaos. We have strategies, I think, at more of a local level than we do at a national level. So part of what our organization recognizes is that we don't have a master data management strategy for a member. So a member can show up in 30+ systems, 4,000 reports. Is that managed at a metadata, the capital M master data management? No. But at the local level, the strategy we employ is try to make sure we have a really good business definition that's approved and reviewed. That we understand the context of that definition. So membership, they're two different things. Subscriber, member are different things. In some cases you do need different definitions because they are something different and there's a business context. So the idea of understanding and documenting the business rule, understanding and documenting the logic that goes into that, and being adaptable for when the business context or needs change. We try to really build that stuff into the data marts. That's really our strategy at the local level. At the national level, there's many efforts to try to put more of an enterprise-wide master data management, data visualization processes in to try to improve that. But I think overall we're probably behind the industry in those practices at the enterprise level. But certainly at the local level, those are some of the
for some of the work that my team does and Shinfeng, I work with Shinfeng closely on those. We look at the EMR as kind of true north. In a way, whatever the analyticals, the data we're trying to produce, we go back to EMR and validate, make sure the data are really accurate. So that's one way of doing it. It's not always right to use the EMR as a way of validating the data because some of the trends may be a different definition. But for some of our operation metrics, that's how we do the data validation.
Yeah, we will test completeness and accuracy against the source, whatever that source is. So all of those traditional data analytic techniques we'll employ. But I think for master data management, big M, we're behind.
With the Affordable Care Act, it seems like the business model for everyone might change dramatically. If you look at member recruitment, member retention, and what members are going to want. So are you looking forward to doing things that are more patient-centered, like patient desire analyticals, of going out and surveying patients more of what they want from their organization, because they're going to have a lot more choice if more people are insured?
I think we've kind of dabbled in some of these. We've done some text mining work, looking at complaints data. There's aspirations around using a lot about kind of more informal contact points with patients. Things like when members call in with issues or problems or requests, about capturing the phone call information, being able to actually process that, turn that into text analytics on that. Because I think there is an area where there is a great need, and yet we don't have that much. So I think there's an aspiration for it. We have done some kind of research projects. We've done some other work looking at modeling patient retention, member retention, trying to identify the pooling across a very broad characteristics for a member to be able to start to look at what are the things that drive changes within that. And I think with the affordable the ACA coming up, there's a lot of interest. I think right now a lot of efforts are really going into just being able to actually operate with the changes coming in the marketplace, just at a very operational level. That's a lot of challenges on the data side. Sometimes that gets kind of blurred between the analytics side and the IT side. It's just like we need to do this, in terms of dealing with our Medicaid population and all the increasing requirements from the state and outside agencies for data. Puts a lot of focus on that, but certainly we have done some work on these aspirations. I think great opportunities there. In the earlier slide where it's saying sales and marketing is kind of some of the biggest uses. Some of the more traditional kind of data mining techniques have been applied there. And we have done some small projects, but I think we can go on there.
It certainly brings lots of challenges with the affordability, and it does also show from medical group that we have to work maybe likely to non-permanent physicians because of the geographic expansion, and how do we make sure the data we can gather, maybe not all the information we have inside in the house, but at least the minimum requirements. So for example, we have this PST, patient support tool, is very powerful, very useful, help preventive care, and how could we extend that for our other providers? That will be very challenging. So it's more to come, but we are looking at that. So it's probably still at the early stage.
We probably have time for one more. Okay, maybe two. See two hands right here.
Okay, so I want to take just a little bit of time to tell you that as a member and as a public health partner, I really appreciate Kaiser. Whereas other insurance companies are, in Geico's and in good hands, you guys actually advertise vignettes where you advocate for behavioral change that prevent chronic disease. And as a public health statistician, I've always really appreciate your partnership in that event. I do have a question, and one, you said that you had a big burden in terms of data requests. So how do you prioritize those? Do you have a user group, or do you have an executive team, or how do you do that?
We constantly try to get better. It's hard. I think our team alone receives probably anywhere between 5 and 8 requests a week, and these are these aren't the ones that you can answer in like 4 hours or less. These are the ones that might take 4 to 6 months to answer. So the backlog continues to grow. We use a process of constant reprioritization, constant review. Every 2 weeks we review our intakes. We plan quarterly so that we try to set our development efforts by a quarter so we keep our analysts focused, and we basically leverage our region's strategic operating plan to be our compass of what is most important, and the senior leadership, vice president level, always has override veto rules. So it's messy, but it kind of works. One of our challenges, and it's one Yvonne and I are trying to work on with the new strategy refresh, is getting more consistent in how we manage and prioritize across the health plan and the medical group side, so that we have a more consistent and transparent process between the two, because having Kaiser Permanente is actually multiple organizations in one, so we have some internal barriers we have to work on with that complexity as well.
Just one thing to add, we have a kind of mixture of centralized groups. We're trying to do similar processes, but we also have decentralized. So we have analysts that will work out embedded within operations. And so they will then, to a certain extent, manage their work with a smaller customer base. And we have things called scrum logs, where this is our existing list, the new things come in, or whether it's on the list, but they'll be able to manage that in a decentralized way rather than a centralized way. If they're all going to be only the resources they need are kind of those local information analysts. But out of that, we're trying to look for how that connects with the broader strategy for saying, well, we're seeing a lot of new ad hoc prototype type things coming in here. We want to start feeding into the strategy to add this into the back end, what we're building in the data marks, so that we can switch that work over and make sure that our front end analysts are cycling onto new problems rather than you do a good job and you just get all the stuff to support. So we've been looking at how we do that. Production support is now a separate group within our dying group. So we're really trying to look at what's the best way to configure all our resources and analysts to get the best kind of throughput going forward. And it's a bit tough. Takes a lot of time.
Last question.
Yeah, my question is very simple. It's just building on the question that was asked earlier. So in terms of 5-star quality reporting and especially the element of patient retention and responsiveness to the patient, I wonder how you are collecting those data, because patients are in their homes, and how are you getting the self-report of the patient of the satisfaction?
Of patient satisfaction? So when there is, the part of my team does that. We have benchmark surveys that we participate in through kind of the standard vendors that do this kind of work. We have regulatory requirements of places that we do this. So when there's an encounter, whether that's a home health worker in your home or a physician that's seeing you in a medical office building, when there's an encounter, we collect that data and de-identify it, send it to the vendor, and they administer surveys that actually benchmark our satisfaction against other people in our industry. and against ourselves, and we can actually compare, wow, our satisfaction is going up at this clinic versus this one, what's happening, what are they doing different than this one, or we also can see where we're performing against like the government regulations that require that. In some of the cases, the HEDIS scores, which are the quality, we look at like the tests, the closing of the care gaps, some of the patient support tool that we talked about. We actually use that tool so that we close care gaps, and that's one of the reasons why we have such high scores in closing those care gaps and have achieved our HEDIS scores. And so having the tools available to deliver the care while the person's in the office. I'm about to turn 40. I'm going to have a whole bunch of care gaps because I turned 40. So when I go for my visit with my doctor on an annual basis, when I walk in, they'll say, oh, hey, Allison, I haven't seen you for a couple of years. You're now 40. You need to have these tests right there. They can administer the orders. I can do it before I leave the clinic. I can do it all right there so I get it closed. So all of that integrated healthcare that we are built on helps us achieve those gaps that we do. So there's kind of a mixture of satisfaction as well as like actually delivering the care to where we get those high scores.
So you don't have like a home-based devices that can send you data systematically?
There's some pilots taking place, but I think the industry as a whole, there's a lot of 60 Minutes. We're actually a book club on these kind of topics. There's a lot of this emerging, but there's privacy issues and we still have years of the physician interaction with the patient in a clinic, which was a movement away from the physician interaction with the patient in their home. Right now it's coming back to that through technology. So we're going to change a lot in 5 years, but I think that Kaiser's got pilot programs, but it certainly hasn't become part of the everyday. But Skype visits and some of these things, even the regulations haven't caught up to give us credit for those. So the government will catch up at some point, but we certainly have some pilot programs taking place there.
And one of the segments of that strategy, that transformative care, the virtual medicine, all those types of things are embedded within that.
So I was going to close, but instead of that, I was going to see if Delilah or Shinfeng, Delilah and Shinfeng did not talk at all, so I was going to see if you want to do any closing comments and we will wrap.
I guess the only thing I'll say is I came to Kaiser about 4 years ago. I have a PhD in kinesiology, minor in applied statistics. Not a real heavy programmer, but I picked it up fast. Steep learning curve, there's a lot to pick up at Kaiser. But the longer I'm there, the more I learn, and I absolutely love it. It's a challenge every day, but being able to have access to so much information and feel like you're impacting the patient and the member, it's very powerful. So it's a really, really fun position to have, and I encourage you to think about it.
I have worked in OHSU for close to 6 years before I went to Kaiser, joined Kaiser 3 years ago. And when I was in OHSU, I was a SAS analyst. I never done any SQL. But when I went to Kaiser, apparently, even we talk about using SAS, every people are using like a SQL inside of SAS. And then it's just like with the master, like the huge database, and then it just, it has a lot to learn, but with all the teams working together and then with your analytic thinking, problem solving skills, and then always make sure you can think outside of the box, and then you can pick up a lot of information, like a lot of skills when working in Kaiser. I have learned a lot in the last 3 years, and then I think Kaiser will provide a huge opportunity for you to step up, to build up your own skills, and then also learn from either the data warehouse layer and then to the programming analytical layer, and then to the front end BI dashboard display layer, and then I think those are all the critical skills for analysts.
Well, thank you for spending time with us at lunch today. We're happy to be here. Take some food, because we don't have room to get it home. And we're going to be here for a while, so if anyone has questions, feel free to come up and ask us, because we'll stay for the next 7 minutes.